our next award recipient had to confirm some funeral arrangements for the dearly departed. And there was a little bit of confusion in the office, so he had to call the next of kin, and in this case was the son-in-law. And he placed a telephone call, and the son-in-law answered the phone. And he said to him, "I'm sorry to be bothering you in your time of grief. I'm sorry to be taking you away from your time of silence, your time of prayer, your time of reflection for the dearly departed. But there's some confusion in our office as to whether or not your beloved mother-in-law wanted to be buried or cremated." And the son-in-law on the other end of the phone could barely hold back his smile, because of course he was more than happy to get rid of the old battle axe. And he said, "Mr. Kaczor, let's not take any chances. Do both." The 100-year mark is a great accomplishment for any business. John J. Kaczor Funeral Home will mark its 100th year of service to the community this month. The funeral home has had a long history of providing care and professional service. On February 28, 1912, John Kaczor's great-grandfather, Andrew Myherick, was registered as an undertaker by the Board of Embalming Examiners. Since 1912, 3 generations have ran the business, which now has chapels in Hamburg, in Blaisdell, and Lackawanna. John Kaczor, the current operator, and his father, John, before him, say that we've never taken out an ad for employment, that the business has been family-run for most, if not all, of its 100 years. Again, that truly is an accomplishment. Kaczor describes the business as having a mom-and-pop mentality. Their long history in the community has made them a trusted choice when the need for his services arises. What Kaczor represents is a time and place for remembering. He believes that the success of his business has been from the relationship his funeral home has made with the community by providing services and comfort in time of need. The life of a funeral director is not a 9-to-5 job, he admits. And he'll tell you about a time on Christmas Eve when a local resident passed away. He was called away from his family to help attend to the body. As he mentioned, your life will never truly be your own in the funeral business. There is an emotional upside to the business, according to Mr. Kaczor, and the fact that during difficult and painful times in the lives of his customers, he provides a service that makes things easier and more comfortable. And we should all be grateful for that, because we are all going to need him at one time or another. Ladies and gentlemen, when somebody around him says, "Can you dig it?" he says, 6 feet deep. Please join me in welcoming our 2012 Business of the Year, John J. Kaczor Funeral Home.
Dad, I gotta say, I feel so inadequate. It took us 100 years to what these guys did in evidently 6 hours. But you know, it's, I guess a question for all of you. Would anybody have an idea where my great-grandfather's funeral home was in Lackawanna?
Ridge Road.
I heard Ridge Road.
Ridge Road.
Hingham Center? No, actually it was none of the above. It was all over Lackawanna because back at that time there were no funeral homes. Everybody was waked in their homes, and I was so fortunate to have my grandfather tell me stories about how people were waked in their homes for 3, 4, 5 days long. I couldn't imagine what it was like then, you know, or what have you. But he would tell me those stories. He was such a wonderful man. The fact that I not only learned from him, but from my dad too. Jim and Joe, who work with us now, they seem like they've been with us forever. They've had the opportunity to be around my dad, but unfortunately not the opportunity to be around my grandfather. Lou told a little bit of a story there, and I'm going to guess it probably is a story, but I'll tell you a little bit of a story about my grandfather. He passed away when I was in embalming school. And I remember asking him, I said, Judge, we said, you know, Polish it was Judge. We were learning in school about, you know, the different ways of grieving and what have you, what people would do. And I says, Judge, what do you do when these women are grieving and they're going to throw themselves on the casket, throw themselves in the grave? And he says, Johnny, it's easy. You goose them. and I thought, you know, he said you goose them. And I learned that from my grandfather. He had just a great sense of humor. And my dad said he was a great businessman, but on the other hand, he was a lousy businessman. You know, some of the things he would say. But I'll also tell you what happened when I first got licensed. And I remember sitting with my dad, or I should say sitting with my dad. I got called into the office by my father. The only time I was ever called into the office by my dad. And he sat me down, and he leaned back in his chair, and he looked at me, and he just simply said, when the president dies, they have somebody to replace him in a matter of minutes. And he said, don't ever think you're irreplaceable. And he says that if you ever take advantage of anybody, you'd be looking for a job. So from my grandfather, I learned such a great sense of humor, I think. And from my dad, the rights and wrongs of everyday life. I also, I guess, have another question for you, and that would be something that would be more up to date, and that, if anybody would have a venture of a guess of what the cremation rate is now in New York State. Pretty close. It's a little bit over 50% now. A little bit over 50%. And, you know, the day that we received the letter to say that we were going to be recognized with this honor, I had an early morning meeting. We didn't receive the letter yet, but I had an early morning meeting with our casket representative, our casket company representative. Now, mind you, they're honestly the world's largest manufacturer of caskets. The world's largest manufacturer, and Simon would know the same. But he brought in a gentleman from California who was a funeral director. They had a family funeral home in Southern California that last year handled 1,100 death calls out of one building. And 1,000 of them were cremations. And I said to those guys, I said, you know, we'll handle more cremations in a matter of a month than my grandfather and my great-grandfather handled in a lifetime. And later that same day, I was with my niece, who now lives in Kentucky. When the steel plant closed, her family was forced to move out of the area. But I was with her, and we were driving down Ridge Road, and I stopped in front of 505 Ridge. That was our old Kaczor funeral home where my grandfather ran his business, and my dad was born and raised upstairs. And I said, that is where our first funeral home was. And then we drove a couple hundred yards further, and I stopped at the corner of Ridge and Center. And I said, there once stood the most beautiful church. It was where My parents were married, I was baptized, and my grandparents were buried. And I thought, so much has changed. So much has changed. But later that same day, we had received a death call where a woman passed away at the Mercy Skilled Nursing Facility at OLD. What a beautiful facility. And how things have changed. And when I went there, Sister Geraldine, who is an absolutely wonderful woman, she met me at the door, and we picked up the woman who passed away. And she told me that the woman who died, her most prized possession, was a picture of her the day that she made her first communion. It was a picture of her receiving the Holy Eucharist from Father Baker. And I thought, what a prized possession. How much has changed. How much has changed. You know, just a couple months ago, we heard the Sabres announce the firing of their coach after, 16 years? It was amazing. They first announced it via Twitter. And I heard of it. I know it, a little bit about it. But so much has changed. It has to come on the news to say that they've announced it by Twitter. So much has changed. You know, and then not too long ago, we heard them talk about the state of Buffalo. The mayor gave the State of the City of Buffalo address, and 2 words that he said I thought were so cool. Under construction. Things start to change. But as much as things change, and we all know that things change in all of our lifetimes, there's one thing that has remained the same, and I think will always remain the same. And that is there will always be in our lives, a time and a place to remember somebody we love. No matter how we do it, a 5-day wake in somebody's home, a cremation with a memorial, we remember somebody we love. And I want to thank you on behalf of our entire family, all of us who work with us, work together, for allowing us to be a part of your family when you needed that time and that place to remember someone. Thank you, everyone.
At the table, we want to recognize you for not only your 100 years, but your customer service. You've had 100% where your customers never complain. So at the table, we want to thank you.
Krista's calling you. Krista's calling you.